Okay, Matthew 5:38 through 42. You heard the original saying, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I say to you, no fighting back against evil. But anyone who slaps your right cheek, turn to him also the other. And the one wanting to sue you and take your shirt, surrender to him also your coat. And whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. And the one asking you to give and wanting from you alone, no rejecting him. And don't reject him. This is a difficult statement of Jesus, and it is radical. Like, the one who slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him also the other. Now, I want you to think for a moment. Is this Kingston? Come up here for a second. All right. Now, this is my right cheek. If you were to hit me, slap me on my right cheek, how would you do it? Okay, so notice his left hand. His first thing is are you left-handed? Yeah, he's left-handed. So he's gonna go with his left hand. Now, in biblical times and in third world countries, the left hand is used for unholy purposes because toilet paper doesn't exist, okay? Just being real. So left hand anything is disgraceful, right? It's an insult. It's not just a physical abuse, it's an insult. Now, let's pretend you're right-handed. How are you gonna slap me on my right cheek? Oh, you see that? A backhand. Boom, okay? This is what my dad calls the backhand of fellowship followed by the front hand of fellowship. Thank you. Let's give Kingston a round of applause. Okay. A backhand is always meant to be demeaning, right? It's not a physical abuse. You're not fighting. It's supposed to be demeaning. The first thing that we want to identify here is that Jesus is not teaching pure pacifism, okay, of no violence at all, okay? If Jesus could have easily given examples of murder, rape, arson, or something very extreme, but he doesn't. He makes it about an insult, an offense. There is physical offense there, but it's not to the level of self-defense, right? This is someone trying to insult you and to do it with a verbal display, spitting in the face, a backhand, or hitting you with the left hand, which would be just undignified, right? But it's not about the physical abuse. And I want you guys to understand that because it's important here. Jesus is very intentional with his words, and he doesn't want us to think that it's not okay for you to defend yourself, right? If someone is trying to physically harm you and do violence to you, you're allowed to use self-defense. There's nothing wrong with that. If someone were trying to harm or physically injure my wife or my kids, I'm allowed to protect them. If I see a stranger on the street who's being physically attacked, Jesus would want me to go and to be an advocate, to protect that person, to be a peacemaker and to stand between. Even if that means I have to get physical to remove that person. Even if it means it might have to use lethal force, right? Because it's not okay for people to go around killing a bunch of people, right? It's hard. These are really difficult questions that we have to wrestle with as Christians, that everyone has to wrestle with. Because in the heat of the moment, like if we haven't thought about what we're going to do, there's not much time to think when something starts happening to you. So if you take time meditating on what you should do in moments, you can act more clear-headed and in wisdom in the moment. So I want you to understand, what Jesus is saying here is not that kind of physical abuse, okay? Where someone is trying to kill you or to sexually abuse you or something like that. Jesus is not talking about just let that happen to you. You're allowed to defend yourself, okay? And you're allowed to defend other people. What Jesus is talking about here is the insult, okay? And it is the offense. And sometimes it could get physical, but a slap is not a threat to your life, right? And that's the point. That's what Jesus is saying. That's the point. Okay. Now, Peter and Paul both rephrase Jesus. Okay? Paul, at the end of Romans chapter 12, he says, do not overcome evil with evil, but overcome evil with good, right? Peter says the same thing. Don't repay in 1 Peter chapter 3, I believe. Don't repay evil with evil, but repay evil with good. So the principle that Jesus is teaching here is rephrased by his followers is instead of returning evil for evil, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, you return evil with an act of good and kindness, right? Are you following me there? That's the motive. In doing so, it's like heaping burning coals on your enemy's head. When you give your enemy food when he's hungry or drink when he's thirsty, you take care of your enemy's needs when he has them, you're repaying his evil toward you with good toward him or her, and you, in doing that, are overcoming the evil. And the only way you can do that is if the inner workings of how you're processing and seeing that person is that you understand they're precious, they're sacred, as we've talked about in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus's teachings are not at the surface level here. If you only look at them at the surface level of do's and do nots, you'll miss what he's getting at. They seem like completely disconnected thoughts. But if you go deeper, get under the surface, you see that how you become the kind of person who can turn from the right cheek when someone insults you, slaps you publicly, whatever, tries to demean you. What kind of person would turn also the left cheek? See, when we get there, it all begins to make sense. We are the kind of person who's trying to pull pearls out of people. Last week, we talked about 2 weeks ago, right? Last week, we had a wild service. Everything was crazy. You guys appreciated me. It was beautiful, wonderful. But we were talking about let your yes be yes and your no be no. A nai, ooh. Remember from the Greek, it's Hebrew. Right there, you find it right in the Greek translated. They don't mess with it. They don't make it into good Greek grammar. They just leave it bad Greek grammar to show that this has a Hebrew source, okay? Semitic language source. Nai for yes, yes, and ooh for no, no, okay? Which means let your yes be a full yes, fully yes and fully no. Don't do like a halvesies or like kind of yes. Yes, but really you're going to say no later. Or yes, I'm going to think about it, but then you're just going to, when you think about it, your intention is to say no, but you're deceiving the person. The reason, and then how we make up for that culturally is that we begin to try to make promises to people so that they'll actually take our yes seriously, right? We demand promises or we offer promises. I'm going to make a promise to you because I'm trying to manipulate you, because you don't believe that I'll be true to my word, but I really need something that you want, right? So when we make promises and oaths and we're swearing something, it's because we're trying to manipulate the person underneath. And it might be even at the subconscious level. We don't even realize we're trying to manipulate the person, but there isn't enough trust between to just yes, yes, no, no. Let your yes be yes, full yes or a full no. And so we have to kind of do the social beat around the bush with our yeses and nos, right? And then we turn toward promises and oaths, which is a form of manipulation. So in order to become the kind of person who allows your yes to be yes and your no to be no, you have to become the kind of person who doesn't need to manipulate anybody. I don't need to get something out of you because God provides for all my needs. I have to become the kind of person who's completely secure in God's provisions and his effort to bring about the good life for me, so that I don't have to make it happen for myself by manipulating everyone around me. Okay? Then we turn toward this passage. The kind of person who allows someone to slap our right cheek and then our left cheek is the kind of person when it's now manipulation toward me, right? First, I'm not going to manipulate other people, but now what happens when someone else is trying to manipulate me? And this is what Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about what should be our response when we know that someone is trying to manipulate us, okay? So the first part of the Sermon on the Mount, we go from our will to God's will. That's how we deal with anger. All anger comes from us not having our way, our will not being done. So to become the kind of person who isn't given to anger, we shift our will to God's will. Our mission to God's mission, our view of people to God's view of people, our commitment. So our view of people is we're not going to look to lust. We're going to look and we're going to pray for those that we see. Our eyes become tools to look and to pray for people, all right? We're constantly seeing the person that's in front of me and valuing them enough to pray, to lift them up before God. And that becomes the general mindset that we have. Our mind isn't like thinking about who's cool, who's not cool, who's important, who's not important, because this is the normal world system, right? We size people up whenever we walk into a room. But the kingdom system of Jesus is when we walk into a room, we start looking people and we see they're sacred, they're precious. We begin to pray, God's goodness upon their life. Lord, let me add value to their life. Let me encourage them. Let me pull a pearl out of them because they're wonderful. They're fearfully and wonderfully made by you. They're your inheritance, Lord. So our view to God's view, our view of people to God's view, our commitment then in marriage is the prime one, but I'm committed to someone not because of what they give to me and what I can get out of them, but by what I can give to them, pouring out my life for them. Just as Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. Then we come to serve, not to be served. And then now to repay evil with good. How does God's justice work when he pardons a murderer, right? Someone who murdered another person, like you can't take that life back. But when the grace of God comes upon the murderer, like Paul, the apostle, he murdered Christians. Okay? When the grace of God came upon his life, he became someone who instead of doing evil to people, he began to do good to all those around him, right? God changed the trajectory of his life. And then he was able to bear with the evil done to him and to repay that out with good in exchange. So God takes a sinner and a bad person and he makes them a doer of righteousness, a doer of good things all around them. Isn't that amazing? And God's really good at doing that. He can do that with even the worst person, and he's done it. He's proved it, you know, and he continues to prove it. So instead of living for justice when you are wronged, you are not going to fight back. You are going to respond to evil with kingdom goodness, the kingdom goodness that flows out of the eternal kind of living, okay? When we have a fountain of life that flows out of us, that is when we can repay evil with good, all right? We step into the deeper Christian life. And,
You're a horrible person, Richie.
I'm a horrible person?
Yeah, you're horrible. The way you talk, the way you dress, your hair, everything about you is awful.
Everything about me is awful?
Yes, and I can't even stand being around you. Every time I'm around you, you make me feel inferior, like you're so much better than everybody else, and I'm sick of it.
I make you feel inferior?
Yeah, you make me feel like a child, like I'm 2 feet tall and I can't do anything right, and my work is always worse than yours, and it makes me feel like, why do I even bother trying at all?
I'm so sorry that the way I've been talking to you and treating you is making you feel that way. Why don't you tell me how your week's been going?
Well, I just feel like I'm not
All right. The skit. Thank you. Let's give Hannah a round of applause. Is that good? That scared you? It woke someone up in the back. If you were here for pre-service prayer, I had my eyes closed. I was just like crying out to God. Then I bring my hands down, and Hannah at that point chose to walk right in front of me. I knocked her on the head. It's like, oh, great. I'm teaching the church team the wrong thing. So she got back at me this morning. What I want to show you, this is real life, okay? When someone comes and they try to insult, the kind of person who can turn the right cheek to the left cheek is the kind of person who, when this happens, you realize that I'm not trying to make things safe for myself. I'm trying to make things safe for that person. I'm going to respond to those heated moments with love for the person. Let's dig a little bit deeper. You noticed I did reflective listening. I'm just saying the last few words that she said back to her so that she can clarify what's going on, right? Which is good. Try that in your marriage. It will help a lot. Don't try it in a nasty way, though. Okay? We talked about that at our leadership life group last night, okay? But when you're reflective listening, the person feels like they can open and share. And then I take a moment where the person is hostile toward me, and now we can sit down and have a real conversation where I'm able to add value to that person's life. That's what Jesus is talking about. Turn the right cheek to the left. Like, can we, in the heat of the moment, when someone is trying to manipulate me by insulting me or doing violence to me with their words, can I be in a state of mind that when they're trying to do evil and harm me, I can repay it with good, right? Can I become that kind of a person? The kind of person who can do that is the kind of person who knows they can win the argument by loving the person. They can win in that moment if they take a little bit of heat and apologize and humble themselves a little bit. Like, I don't think I was talking to you in that kind of tone of voice. You don't even need to say any of that. You don't need to defend yourself if God is your defender, right? My middle name is Daniel. If anyone wants to write that down for future church trivia nights. Amen. Daniel means the Lord is my judge. If I walk around understanding that it's not what other people say about me, it's what God says about me, then when someone says something that is misaligned with what God says about me, I'm not affected by it because my identity, my value, my purpose all flows from his view of me. And where do I discover that? From the Bible. I don't take another person's word for it. I take God's word for it. It's the authoritative, the inspired word of God. This is why I often say you can't just use positive thinking and affirmations to build yourself up. Because if you build you up, you can also tear yourself down. You think that you're a good person by your own word, but I think I'm a good person by his word. It's a big difference. So if Tong comes up to me or my wife comes up to me and says, hey, you're not a good person. I don't like you. I can say, but I am a good person in my heart, okay? And God likes me. And if I'm under God's love, that's sufficient for my heart and my soul. I have a sense of belonging in his family. So then in the heat of the moment, like, I'm not going to respond in injury to what Tong might say to me. I'm going to respond in grace and kindness and mercy. So we have to be secure in how God thinks of us, right? And then when people try to manipulate us, Jesus covers 3 different kinds of manipulation, okay? The manipulation of being insulted, okay? Publicly insulted. It's usually going to be public if someone slaps you in your face. It could be private, but usually public, okay? They spit in your face, they slap you, they try to demean you, okay? And what is Jesus' answer for that? Non-retaliation. You're not going to retaliate that way, but you're going to lean in to have a conversation, hear what the person's saying. Then you can make a difference. You're repaying evil with good. The second thing that Jesus covers is unreasonable requests. When someone, right here in verse 40, and the one wanting to sue you and to take your shirt, surrender him also your coat. So there's an unreasonable request. The person wants to take the very shirt off your back, right? That's what Jesus is saying. He wants to take the very shirt off your back, like they need that from you. It's an unreasonable request, right? How are we to respond? We give generously. We repay that unreasonable request with extra generosity. Jesus gives one more example with that. The one who forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. In Roman culture, in the colony of ancient Rome, the empire that ruled the known world, okay, if a Roman soldier asked a non-Roman to carry their gear for 1 mile, you were legally obligated to do that. It's an unreasonable request, right? But the Roman soldier could ask that of you. And Jesus says, that's unreasonable, right? Like they impair your whole day so that they can have an easy time when it's their job to carry their gear, right? It's an unreasonable request that is set up politically. So it's a political flaw in the system that treats people unfairly who are not Roman citizens, right? How did Jesus say we should respond to that? He said, go the extra mile. Walk with them. Instead of 1, you're going to go 2. Because I guarantee you, if you walked the 2nd mile, and they did, the Christians did, when they walked that 2nd mile, that Roman soldier now wants to know about why you would go a 2nd mile. And you get a whole 20 minutes or so to talk to them about what God's done in your life. Right? You open up the realm of God's goodness upon that person by going with them the extra mile. They started with an unreasonable request. You are going to unveil the goodness and the power of God to transform lives. Awesome, right? The third thing is giving when unlikely to be repaid. Okay, this is a manipulation. Someone is asking to get money from you. And the point here is that Jesus is trying to make it sound like you're not likely to be repaid for the money that you're loaning. Jesus says, don't turn that person away. You give to them. Generosity. Now, obviously, you're not going to give into credit card debt, right? That's not giving. That's borrowing money from the bank to give to another person. If you're living out of debt, you can't give to people. That's just the nature of it, right? You can be generous in the moment, but you can't be a big giver. That's why we have our giving declaration. God wants you to steward your finances well so that you can be generous. If you're in debt, you're a slave to your debt. And then you can't be generous with people without becoming a further slave to your debt. But God wants you to be generous. So he wants you to work out of your debt, but that takes wisdom. It takes discipline. It takes self-control. It takes sitting down and making a budget and sticking with it. And if you're not good with numbers or good with budget, here's advice. Don't eat out. Don't go to the movies. Don't buy anything that you want. Wait a month before you buy anything. Like, you just do that. Guess what? Oh, don't take a loan to buy a new car. Like, guess what? You're going to start saving a lot of money and you'll be able to live within your means. Simple, not that going to, and you think, well, I don't get to go out and eat with all my friends. But what you're doing is you're thinking about a future where you can be generous to others. And then you can be a standard that helps them to succeed in their life, right? Because a lot of people have money issues. And you can help be a source of strength for them as they're figuring out their money issues, right? But you can't if you have worse money issues, If 2 blind people lead each other, they both fall into a pit. If 2 indebted people try to borrow money from each other, so as I was preparing for my sermon, I was reading through Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. It's a very popular book, and I appreciate the field of psychology and what people have discovered through just analyzing what are people's garbage and junk. It's important. All truth is God's truth. The church should never be afraid of any of the sciences. We actually invented the sciences. Every major science was invented by Christians. To point to God, okay? The devil likes to take what was meant for good and to turn it for evil, and God likes to take what was evil and turn it for good. And so psychology is not anti-Christian. It's good. It's good. Now, some psychologists are horrible people that will lie to you and lead you down a path you do not want to go on. But most aren't. That's why we have in America some good boundaries for who can become a psychologist, because you can get real messed up, right? Sometimes you just need to man up and to become a disciplined person that spends time in God's presence and in his word. Like, God can renew any mind. He really can, and he does. Even if there's mental disability, God can renew the mind, and you might not have all the same capacity as other people, but your mind can still do what is most important, which is think about how to bless people and to be good to others. You know, like, God isn't going to, when you die and you go to heaven, he's not gonna be like, okay, we're gonna give you an IQ test. If you have an IQ past 110, you get in. But if not, all the dumb people go to hell. No, God doesn't care about that. God doesn't care about intellect. He cares about character and heart. And honestly, God even cares past the character and heart. He values you because he created you. And he's written a destiny over your life, and he's trying to lead you to that. So I'm reading this book, and I'm like, okay, is Jordan Peterson going to agree with Jesus or disagree? I'm ready to throw punches at anybody who disagrees with Jesus, all right? Like, I'll go to bat, even if they're like considered one of the most world-renowned psychologists. Like, come on, let's go to bat. I'm willing to, you know? So I was thinking, my assumption was that I was gonna have to debate some of his concepts. But at the end of the chapter, I'm like, he mentions Jesus' teachings, and he mentions that the real answer is a metaphysical one, that you don't live by a winning according to this world's realm of winning, but according to God's realm of winning. Okay? That's how you escape this path. So the first chapter, he talks about basically winners win more likely, and they're healthier, live longer, and they have more connections, and everything goes good with them. Losers lose more often, and they get worse and more unhealthy and all of that. So he says, in nature, the one who is the aggressor, the most aggressive, strongest, brutal, ruthless person, or lobster, or a monkey, they're the one who rises to the top, and they have the best place to live, have the most children, and best mates, and the most food, and live longest. Okay, I don't know if I repeated myself there, but you get the point. So that psychology works in the animal kingdom and amongst humans as well. How do we escape that as humans? By, punching the people around us, by yelling at anyone who crosses us, by like, it's my way or the highway, and you never back down. You don't walk in humility or anything like that. No, you just change the game. Like, it's not about you becoming the boss, the CEO, or the most respected person in your company. It's about winning by God's terms. So if my fellow worker or my manager slaps me in the face, and I metaphorically slaps me in the face, if they do it physically, that's an assault charge. So, and you can file the assault charge. That's okay. All right. But metaphorically, they slap you in the face or demean you publicly, insult you publicly, and I repay that evil with good. Non-retaliation. I lean in. I'm like, what's going on, man? Have I done this? Reflective listening, I disarm him. I love that person. I might get fired. I might look like the low man on the totem pole, but I walk with my chest out because guess what? I repaid evil with good. I just did what Jesus did when he laid down his life. He picked up his cross and laid it down for the salvation of broken sinners, right? So I can hold my head up high when I do things for God's kinds of wins, right? That means I can take a loss by the world standards, but the world is passing away. It's perishing. It will all be consumed with fire, and God will remake it. So what really matters is how we treat others. Amen?